back to Typecast Heroes, where we believe typology can save the world. I'm Amanda Fogelson.
And I'm Jesse Miller, and today we are going to be talking about our comparison of the cognitive functions. So we have been typing people for several months now. That was kind of an accident. It sort of just started happening. And one of the big things that I notice is people tend to confuse cognitive functions, and they don't understand how it presents in themselves or in others. And then even more than that, they end up fighting over which one has more merit. Mm-hmm. So that's why Amanda and I decided this series was so important, because the big thing that we preach over and over again here is that you have the right language to describe what's going on in your mind, in the minds of others, so that you can find common ground. And it's really important that you understand how these functions present. But because extroverted thinking and extroverted feeling are so similar, they can, at least similar in the way that they present, because they're both extroverted judging functions, people are often very confused. So today we are going to be trying to clear that up a little bit for you guys.
Just a little reminder that we truly believe anyone can be anything. And while, again, truly wholeheartedly believe that, we want to make sure that you all understand while watching these videos and this versus series that what we're talking about is we're going to be giving a lot of examples of the behaviors that are pretty consistent across the board with FE users and TE users, and just to kind of show you guys the difference within those behaviors and situations. However, the real takeaway from this video should be the motivation behind the behavior. So why do FE users do the things they do versus why TE users do the things they do? So the things they do might look similar, but the why behind it is what matters.
Exactly. So both of these types, who, if you have extroverted thinking or extroverted feeling in the top two of your stack, they both have sort of these tendencies to not like criticism. Nobody likes criticism, and nobody likes a suggestion that they need to grow. But I've noticed in particular, these two functions as the top two tend to struggle a little bit when someone suggests something contrary to what they believe about themselves. So as we go through this, Amanda said, look at the motivations. Particularly if you lead with extroverted feeling or extroverted thinking, if that's like your main function, your dominant function, your hero, you may be a little resistant to looking inward to check out these motivations, or you may be so confident in yourself already that you're like, nope, I already know my motivations. I don't need to do any introspection. I strongly encourage you to look at those motivations, because when I'm working with somebody on their type and I encourage them to look at those motivations, the types of things that they end up like discovering are pretty revolutionary. So I'm asking you to do the same thing as we look at these things, because the ego doesn't want to be scraped down. It wants to stay the way that it is, and it's really important that you look. So I know this is a little longer than we usually do for these types of things, but I think it's really important, particularly for the extroverted types who may be a little younger. We talk about this in a lot of these function videos, that if you are younger than 30, if you're younger than 40 even, and you are particularly extroverted, you may never have had a huge amount of time to introspect and to look at yourself. So that is what we are encouraging you to do today. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the examples. So now I'm going to give a brief definition of the judging functions as they are defined by Carl Jung. So we rely on Carl Jung because he was the first, but I also pull on several other Jungian analysts throughout time. So Carl Jung came out with psychological types in the 1920s, and then since then a lot of work has been done. Jungian theory has been around for 100 years. So I am not just pulling on him for these definitions, I'm pulling on a lot of the other analysts who have done work with him. And so we are talking about, hundreds of thousands of people is where this information is coming from, because that's how many people the Jungian analysts were analyzing altogether. So if you want to know how I get this information, it's all linked below. Just thought I'd put that out there. But that's all books. Somebody asked me if they could just go watch the videos. No. They're books. And a lot of it comes from the work that I have done with thousands of people myself. So just to put that out there into the universe. Okay, so extroverted judging is when your mental energy flows outward into the environment. So it's when you are looking outward to make a decision. So it's how you're going to make a decision based on external information. So sometimes this can be kind of idealized because it is still the person's interpretation of that information. So Carl Jung called it objective. What he meant by objective was outside of the self. But it's really, really important to understand that extroverted thinking and extroverted feeling is not mind reading. It's not mind reading. It's not some magical way to like send out your little like mental feelers and know what everybody around you is feeling.
I can see you like trying to like be a bug right there.
Yes, it's like, well, it's like what's her face, Mantis from Guardians of the Galaxy, where she can just like she had those little things.
That,
It's you've got our blooper. It's not like that where you can just like send out your tentacle and like know what people are feeling. It's still the user's interpretation of that external information. And that's really important to understand, that extroverted thinkers don't just automatically have like the perfect, objective, pure idea of what people are thinking. Extroverted feelers don't have a perfect, objective idea of what people are feeling. It is external, so they are concerned with that information. And because they use it so often, they rely on it so often, they tend to get really good at interpreting it. But it is still their interpretation, and it's so important to remember that. Because a lot of times when I'm typing people, there are a couple tests I throw out because we don't have one of our own yet. People often test really high on extroverted thinking and introverted thinking, because you still need to be like, it is still a subjective process to an extent, because your interpretation of the external environment. So that can make this confusing as well. So some of the reasons that it can be really challenging to understand the difference between these two things is because they are both concerned with controlling the environment around them. So EXTJs, so ESTJ or ENTJ, are concerned with controlling all of the things. ENFJs and ESFJs are the same thing. They're controlling the environment around them because these are action-based judgments. So it's kind of quick. It tends to be very much in the moment. And so if an ENTJ is organizing a party, or if an ESFJ is organizing a party, oftentimes all you see as the person who's looking at them is somebody who's kind of confident, maybe even a little bossy, a little assertive, trying to run how the party's going to go. And it can look very, very similar. And so if you are a person who's using those functions and you're not very introspective, as we mentioned in the beginning of the video, it can be really challenging for you to know which function you're using, because all you know is you want to be the one who's leading. You want to be the one in charge. So the technical definitions is extroverted thinking tends to be concerned with bringing logic into the outside world. So it's structuring all of the environment. It's structuring physical things. It's structuring tangible things. Extroverted feeling tends to be concerned with people's beliefs and value systems. So it tends to be a little bit more abstract in its manifestation, because it is concerned with understanding how all of the people around them are feeling and what they're valuing. So two different things, right? We've got values and we've got the thinking logical process. But we're going to talk about now is the examples, and then we're going to explain the motivations behind it. So
remember, the examples, as you hear these, even if you tend to like lean towards what we're talking about, either one, just remember the why behind it. So you may want to please everyone at a party, or you may want to structure your environment around you or anything like that, but it's the why. So
super important. So as we mentioned that, we're going to now talk about planning a party. So both of them, like I mentioned, will want to create a shared experience for the people around them. Like I just interviewed an ESTJ who said that his primary concern is that the people around him are taken care of. And that can sound a lot like extroverted feeling, but you have to look at what's going on behind the screen. So extroverted feeling, it cares a lot about the values of the people around them, right? So for instance, our ESFJ friend that we talked about forever in the ESFJ video, or my mom, who I finally typed as an ESFJ, it took forever to type her, they're concerned with creating a shared experience. But why? Why are they concerned with that? It's because they've decided that the people around them value something about an experience. So when they are going through their thought process of how can we make this the best party possible, it's like they are looking into their mind and they're like, okay, people value if they can have their drinks and their food in this location so that it creates like a shared little space. So this is going to look very homey. It's going to have lots of decorations here. It's going to have these things that don't really make sense, but it looks nice because that's what people value. So that is how they are creating that shared experience. Extroverted thinking, they can come in and they can set up something as well, but they'd be like, okay, let's think about how people move through this space.
Absolutely.
Like, are people going to come around? People need to have room to move. We don't want to create like a clop of people right here because nobody likes that. We want people to be able to move quickly throughout this space.
Put the plates on this side of the table so people can grab them and then they can go this way. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you relate like hardcore to that?
Well, so I was literally just about to say, like, I honestly had no idea what was coming next for the TE, but in my mind I was like, it's not the same. I would never, going into a party, I would never think people would like to be here, so let's put the things here. I would 100% look at a table and be like, okay, if I put the plates here, then they can move through without hitting each other here, and then they can leave and they can go sit down. Like, I would never try to create a shared experience of everything happening. Mine would be what's the most efficient and like what makes sure that everyone can just like have their space and like no one's gonna be on top of each other.
Exactly. And so our ESFJ friend actually told me a story, a while ago. Time is a construct. He told me this story about how he let one of his friends who is an ESTJ plan a party, and he said the way that the parties were planned were just so different. They were both good. He said he was really concerned with how people were going to experience things. So he spent a lot of time thinking about making sure everybody had the food that made sense for them, for that specific person. So he was trying to make sure everybody's dietary needs were met and things like that. So he went a little bit, probably not the most efficient or effective way to have a party, but the ESTJ, because she shows people through her actions that she loves them, she was thinking about, okay, how can we make this fair for everyone? So she was thinking about having like enough items of food, like enough physical items of food for all the people, but she really wasn't as concerned with whether or not everybody got what their specific diets were.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't like the big efficient thing to do. So it was a big difference in their motivations behind it. But both parties can be good. Both can show that they care. It's just two different ways of doing it. Okay, so something else that's a common problem is a lot of ENFJs think they're actually ENTJs and ESFJs can think that they're ESTJs. They can all mixed up with each other because, again, they're all extroverted judgers first. So one of the things that I've seen is if an ENFJ is in a work environment, they can look so much like an ENTJ. I grew up with an ENFJ. My mom's boss was an ENFJ, and I remember she was she was not a warm person. There was not a whole lot of warmth going on with her. She was very much like, get the things done. But the reason that she was like that is because her interpretation of extroverted feeling at that time was that people value coming to work and doing their job. And that's the way that she had seen it. And she was like, I can be the best me if I can be, and this can be the best job and the best experience if everybody knows their expectations and if I'm really firm on my expectations. And that's how we can get this place to where I see it in the future. And so she was kind of strict in that regard. And I've seen this as a trend with some ESFJs and ENFJs, that they can be sort of strict with their expectations of things. And if you don't know them well, you may actually think that they're a thinker, not a feeler, because it is so strict. However,
the point of that though is that like it's not about the structure behind it, it's about the people being affected by the structure.
Right. So they have understood that people need a certain amount of structure in order to be the best that they can be. And so they have a very structured setting. So to the user or to the observer, it looks like they're using extroverted thinking, but they're not. They're really considering the values of the people around them. And if it goes even further, if that ENFJ or ESFJ grew up in a very conservative, strict thinking environment, then they're even more like, this is the way this goes. One of the ways that they can tell, where we will talk about later, but it's their inferior function, but we will cover that later. So extroverted thinking, again, they are very, when they're at work, are very strict, are very like to the point as well. But why they're doing that is because they are concerned with does this make logical sense? So like when they're going internal, they're like, okay, is this the most logical, effective, and efficient way to get this task done? Versus the EXFJ, who's like, is this the thing that people are going to value the most? Which one are they using? That is something that really only the user themselves can answer. They have to go internally and figure out which one that they're doing. Do you want to add anything to that?
I think it can. I think the inferior function part of it is going to be a big thing, because as like having a strong TE, not leading with it, but having a strong TE, and my FI being what it is, which is so much about other people, it can look even more confusing if my FI is so concerned about others. And so sometimes when I'm structuring something, it is to make sure that everyone else can easily use it, but again, it's still, if I had to choose a stem, right, but I would also have to it stems from the fact that the most logical thing is to make sure that everyone can find it and can understand it, and it's the most efficient, because I don't want them asking for help later. So it's still about the people, it's about others, because my FI has decided that that's important to me, but the why behind it. So I'm just picturing like if there was another person who is watching this and being like, oh, I love people and I'm so about the people.
That's something too, especially as EXTJs get older, they start caring more about people, and EXFJs start caring more about the logic. So that's something else to keep in mind, as you go throughout your journey, your functions tend to, you start trying to tap into your inferior function. Exactly. And it can be challenging to figure out which one that you've led through. So look back on your life and think, was I going for more efficient things, or was I going for more value things? Something else to think about is an EXTJ would be more likely to care about like the bottom line, the hard numbers of a company. The EXFJ, would care more about maybe something like the company's mission statement and maintaining the company's values. Versus, again, EXTJ would maybe more concerned with the tangibles, like the output of
what your revenue looked like that year, what your we were successful because we hit this revenue goal, versus we were successful because the turnover rate was 10% lower than it was the year before. So you're making people happier. You're meeting their needs.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about problem solving. So this is a really great example, because this literally just happened today. Originally I was going to talk about a flat tire, but my car, I drive a really junky car. I have extroverted feeling parent. My husband has extroverted thinking parent. And my car broke down in an intersection. The battery just died in the middle when I was trying to make a right-hand turn. I have no idea why. We still can't figure it out. I don't know. He probably knows why. He fixed it, but I have no idea. My immediate thought was my children in the vehicle, and how can I get them out of this situation? That was my first thought. And because it's my parent function, if it had been my lead, my mom, our car broke down all the time because we were broke when I was a kid. So she was always, her main concern was making sure that we were taken care of, we weren't freaking out, and that we were safe. But for me, it actually caused me a lot of anxiety because it's my parent function. And so I felt like this compulsion of, oh my God, my kid's in the back of the car. I got to make sure he's okay. I'm really anxious about this. But that was my primary thing. And I didn't want to be an inconvenience to the people around me. This is so stupid. All I kept thinking of is people are trying to make...
That was my very first thought. You probably cared so much about what the person behind you was feeling.
Oh my God, it was killing me. I was like, I'm in their way. I have to get out of their way. And so I called my husband, and he was very much leap into action.
Yep.
So extroverted thinking, how do we fix this? So he immediately was like, okay, so are there lights on? What are happening? What sounds are happening? Where are you? And I was like, I don't know. I'm at a road. There's an intersection. He was like, no, you have to read the signs, right? And he was very much like, okay, these are the logical steps that you take to fix this. Because you losing your mind, I was going to say something else, losing your mind is not helpful in this moment. And so let's look at the motivations. Let's break this down. Extroverted feeler, I was concerned with the values of the people around them. So people value time, and I am blocking traffic. That's obnoxious. My son values his safety, obviously, because he's 8 years old almost. And so I was concerned that he did not like this situation and that his values were not being met. My husband, extroverted thinking, bringing logic into the outside world, I gave him a very physical, tangible, external problem. He was like, okay, I can fix this. Let's go through the steps to fix the situation. And it was
I do not
ridiculous.
ever want to be in a situation like that with you. It would drive me nuts.
I have broken down so many times.
So many times. And I'm just so happy I've never been in the car with her because, y'all, I would like...
So many accidents, too. I think I've been in 16 accidents. That's not even an exaggeration. I'm not a good driver. INFJs have that reputation for being just total terrible drivers, and I don't think it's true for all INFJs, but I know it's true for this INFJ.
Fit this INFJ.
It's bad. I can't drive very well. I break everything.
She will go through, and she has now found a new way. We've been living next to each other for 3 years. She has now found a new way to get me back to my house after we film. And it's through a neighborhood, so she doesn't have to get on the main road at night.
Yeah, because I hate them.
She doesn't like turning left.
I don't like turning left. I won't.
So she will go out of her way, and she's like, well, this way's faster because it's only a mile. But it's a neighborhood. You can only drive 5 miles an hour.
Guys, I don't like making left turns because then the people behind you have to wait on you. They have to wait, and they've got things to do.
Welcome to driving on a road.
I don't like causing an inconvenience. Like, I really don't. It's not even like, it's like it gives me anxiety.
It gives her such bad anxiety.
To cause
You can like, and you can see her like escape into her mind in the situations where she's like, you know, like it's, yeah.
I triggered her child.
So much.
I'm sorry, guys. Something to remember is that there is an axis. So if you can't figure out which one you are, if you can't figure out if you are extroverted thinking or extroverted feeling, and I will just be honest, in my experience, you extroverts have infinitely harder time with this than introverts. Like, you just do. Especially if you are somebody who, I see this constantly, and I love it. Don't get me wrong. It is such a gift when people share this with me. But I do get this often, where people who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s have never had the time to introspect, and they're really, really, really looking at themselves for the first time. And it is a beautiful process. But I also see where it can be really challenging for some of them, because it's like, it's an identity crisis, right? And that's no fun for anyone. Introverts have one too, but we will talk about that in another video. But I'm just saying, for this specific thing, it does seem to be a lot harder for you guys. So if you are an EXXJ, I feel for you. But that's where your inferior function can come in. So inferior functions, or this is where the other end of the axis, the other end of the axis can come in. So if you have introverted thinking, that means that you have extroverted feeling as well. So as you are concerned with all of the values, and society values logic. So that means you may feel incredibly logical and efficient, which is why you have to look into yourself and be like, okay, is it because I care about the values of others, or I care about being efficient and I care about bringing logic externally? What do you feel bad about? Look at yourself. Do you feel inside that you may not be so great at the logical systems? Is your thinking process, like what you think, your logical framework, does that need to be developed because it's a child function or it's an inferior function? If it's one of those things, then do you tend to be like bratty about it, defensive about it? You're probably an extroverted feeler. If you are bratty about what you value, or you feel bad about what you value, you're like,
or you have
no
idea
what you value. Because if you are a particularly extroverted ESTJ, you may not have tapped into these introverted functions at all to even know. But do you have any idea of what you value? Like, really think. Do you make any decisions based on what you value? Or is it all based on what's laid out in front of you? And you're just looking at the numbers or the data or the information. Yeah, any information that's in front of you. Or do you sometimes make decisions, especially older EXTJs, do you sometimes make decisions based on what you believe is right? So that's what you need to look at, because, and if you do now make decisions based on what you believe or based on what you think, if you're an EXFJ, God, this is so hard. If you're one of those, and now you're in your 40s, 50s, even 30s for some of you, and you are all of a sudden starting to make a lot of decisions based on what you think, but before it wasn't like that, then that means that you're probably an extroverted feeler, because types don't change, they evolve. And I will say that till the day I die, probably.
So the last thing to think about is that there is something called looping, and you can go see it in so many of our other videos. We've talked about this. But in particular, your hero function and your child function are both in the same attitude. So if you're an extrovert, both those will be extroverted, introvert, introverted. So in this situation, just like Jesse said, you may, if you feel like you maybe aren't good at something, it could be your child or your inferior function, but also, this is where it gets a little bit trickier, is that you could actually feel like you're really good at it because you're living it and you're completely skipping your parent function or the main T or F in your stack. So for an example, I am an ENFP. My hero is an extroverted intuition, but my child is extroverted thinking. So I don't actually feel like I am bad at extroverted thinking at all, because I feel for a long time I completely skipped my introverted feeling. And so I strengthened my extroverted thinking. So for a long, long time, it felt like I was a thinker because of that. So that could also be your case. So when Jesse was saying introspect, I'm an extrovert and I am an extroverted intuitive at that. So like it had never happened. I had like never looked inside myself until I was like faced with that situation where I had to. And so I just really want to push that one more time, that especially if you're an extrovert, you have to introspect to get this, because it can be so confusing. It can trick you up in so many different areas. You could be looping, you could just not have, you could have maybe not strengthened this function. You could have, there's so many different things, something you could have thrown you off track.
You could be inside out. You could be an inferior grip. You can be in lots of things.
Literally,
that you don't know.
So many options. So you have to look inside yourself and look at the decisions you're making. Why? Why are you making the decisions that you make? And take like multiple choices that you've made in the past. If you don't have like a big decision that you're making right now, and so it's hard for you to tell, think about decisions that you've made in the past. Think about why you made the decisions that you did. So for me, I was so convinced that I was so logical, and in some ways I am, but at the end of the day, I was still taking it all back to say, I am basing this logical decision off of the fact that I believe this. So
she's making me laugh, because a year ago she would have cut you if you told her that she was a feeler. She would have cut you.
I still don't like it, because I'm just not emotional, and it just like, I don't know, I think it comes off a certain way sometimes. Anyways, it's my own issue. And so
this is a complex.
It is completely. But I love my FI, but I couldn't understand. So like when we just said that, like, if you don't even know what you believe in, or you don't know your morals, I didn't until I was actually asked to write them out. And then once I wrote them out,
by an ENTJ of all
by
people.
an ENTJ.
Hilarious.
Hilarious. But so helpful. So helpful. And so when I wrote that out, I was like, holy crap. Every decision that I've made, while yes, I believed it to be the most efficient, it wasn't because it was the most efficient, because I've definitely said no. I've definitely chosen inefficient things to do before, because it fit within my FI. So again, like, but that took a lot of like layering, like digging through so many layers to figure out that so many of those decisions didn't fall within TE, it fell within FI. So I just say that just because we're talking mainly to extroverted people here, and it can be so hard in those situations to really figure it out. But at the end of the day, our purpose here, our desire for you all, is to give you that language. And if you don't know the functions you're using, you can't use that language accurately.
Particularly if you're older, because there are some dangers. So we're going to talk about that. There's some danger with becoming too extroverted. So in Carl Jung's theories, there's something called hysteria, and he talks about it a lot. And it can happen, it can manifest in different ways, but for incredibly extroverted judgers, it's like an over-exaggerated, overinflated view of yourself, where you think like you've got this imagined rapport of everybody around you, or you suddenly think that you can connect with, you know, what's best for all of the people because you understand them all so well, because you're like, it's almost like you have such a loose sense of self. You start like blending and like seeping into everybody around you, and you think everybody around you is just like you, and it is a scary thing to have happen. He talks about it quite in depth, and then Daryl Sharp continues it in several of his books. But it's this idea that you seep into the environment so much that you become overbearing, over controlling. Like it is like 15 times what we talk about with heroic inflation, and it's not a great place to be. So that is the fear if you do not, and it can happen to extroverted feelers and extroverted thinkers, if you don't take that time to step back and introspect. And as Amanda was giving that great example of how she hadn't looked at her FI, I just want to hit home again for the extroverted feelers that society pushes logic so freaking hard that particularly if you are an EXFJ man, then you're going to feel very logical, because nobody, especially like I mentioned, our ESFJ friend who is a huge like higher up in this company in Atlanta, should not say that. I just said it. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. But it's definitely not like it's like a corporate position.
Yeah, he's got like a big deal job. Like he graduated from Georgia Tech. Like this guy is very like, if you think thinker, he would think it just looking at his resume and all the things that he's accomplished. But for him, he has leaned into his extroverted feeling process. He's very good at it. But I'm just saying that if you were in that position, and if your family pushes logic upon you, and if everybody's logical, then you can feel very logical. And you can, if you never look inward to say it's a value thing, then you're never going to strengthen your TI, you're never going to strengthen your SI or your NI.
Right.
And you run that risk of losing a core of yourself. And according to Carl Jung, these complexes, hysteria, all of these things, like these can lead to psychosis. They can lead to depression. They can lead to all sorts of issues. And it's really, really scary, I think, because EJs dominate the planet. Like not in numbers, but in as terms of leadership, in terms of corporations.
People in power.
Exactly.
People who are making these big decisions. Yeah.
And if EJs aren't looking at themselves, then we are leaving these decisions in the hands of people who aren't looking at their integrity, who aren't making sure that what they're doing really makes sense
and falls in line with them,
with
whichever
their
way that goes,
or their thinking process. And both of those can be challenging because EJs offer so much to the planet. So we have talked a lot about the EJs today, but
we also have an FI-TI video, like FI versus TI. So if you are confused, or if you just want to make sure, there's no such thing as too much well, there's absolutely such thing as too much information. But in this situation, if you do not feel 100% certain that you know which function you're using, we do have the FI versus TI video, which again would fall on the axis FETI and TEFI. So you can go watch that and try to figure out maybe which axis you are. And if you are still having some trouble, then comment below or message us and talk you through it.
Because being human is really hard.
Hopefully this makes it a little bit easier.
Thank you for watching. We've got lots to see on our channel, so go check it out. We've got a playlist for each of the 16 types. We have all of the functions and all of their placements. We've got so much.
We've got so much. And there's just more coming. We're pretty much, we've at least got the calendar through fall, all the way through fall into winter.
This is probably coming out in the middle of winter.
This probably is.
We have so much, guys.
We do. Thanks for being here, and like, subscribe, comment, share, all the things. If you are any of the types we listed,
any of
EJ, please comment below and let Jessie interview you. You can also message us on Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, or Discord and let us know there as well that you're interested. If you have no idea what I'm talking about with this whole interview process, please go watch our very first video, Welcome to Typecast Heroes, as well as some of the project updates that we have, just so you can kind of know where we're at. But in particular, we are looking for the EJs. So,
Yes.
come talk.
Bye.
Bye.
Let's gather around the type fire and sing our type fire song. Our MBTI TYPOLOGY song. And if you feel uncomfortable, then know there's nothing wrong.